Callan Moritzen wants to know how you balance the knowledge that you've been taught in school and the nuances of platforms like this one. And before I let you run free here, Nate, I've said it a couple of times, probably on some podcast episodes, that I think it's like I was when I was going through school, I didn't know any different. So it was really easy to just kind of go along and just learn what was being taught and then regurgitate it and think that was all there was. And then once I was out of school, I started realizing or being exposed to more of the ideas that, maybe this isn't as black and white as we thought. And maybe there's a bit more to it. Maybe we don't have all the answers. And I think that was the easier way to go than to be exposed to that idea during school and then have to still will myself to learn it as well as I needed to pass tests and then eventually pass the boards and trying to find the value in it. I know I've spoken to a few students who feel the same way, but that being said, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I know I try to like share like the Clinical Athlete Podcast or PT on Ice or PT Inquest to all my classmates, and a lot of them are like, no, I don't have time for that. Like right now, I'm just gonna pass my test and then move on and just only focus on the information that school is giving me because that's enough. And sure, like I think if you're trying to get a 4.0 GPA, like you're going to be in the books all the time as a PT student. But I think we definitely have time to do it, and I think it definitely helps because, for example, like trigger points was a part of my exercise physiology in the curriculum, and in following Clinical Athlete, being on the forum. I read a lot about the hypothesis of what a trigger point is, and that kind of helped me answer some questions on the test. Whether or not I like bought in with it, is a different story. But it helps. I think it helps to do that. And honestly, I don't want to discourage someone from trying to get a 4.0 in school, but it's. Sure. I mean, you guys could probably touch on this, but how important is it really to get a killer GPA? And I know for me, I'm thinking about doing maybe like a research after school. Maybe not. I'm still early, but I'm thinking about it at least, and I want the option. So it kind of matters, but I think there's such a shortage of clinician investigators that they'll really take anyone that's asking good questions and that's, maybe gotten published during PT school, So I really think it's just not an issue. And if you do stuff here, listening to this podcast, some of it might help you, some of it might hurt you. But I think at the end of the day, it evens out. But at the end of the day, you're going to be so much more knowledgeable of things in the clinic when you listen to things like Clinical Athlete or PT on Ice and Senior Rehab Project, if you just try to find your own information. So I think we definitely have time for it. I don't know. What do you guys think? You guys were in school and
one time long ago, right, Quinn?
Yeah. Well, the GPA thing, I think it matters. I don't actually know if it matters to go on and do future research. It's my understanding that the GPA, you need it high enough to get your degree and to get those letters behind your name, and then ultimately it doesn't actually matter as long as it's high enough to stay in the program. Obviously, it's somewhat of a reflection on the work that you're putting in, but no, I don't think that keeping that 4.0 really matters once you're in physical therapy school. I also get the other side of the perception that I'm putting all this, I don't want to fail out. I mean, ultimately, that's like probably what most people are worried about, not necessarily keeping their 4.0, but staying in the program. We always have that like just scared feeling. I always had that in PT school. I never was quite relaxed.
Are you now?
Which is probably a good thing. Yeah. So I guess I understand the other side, thinking about it as it's not helping me, but you made a point, Nate, that it actually can. And even if you're reading about the other perspective, like trigger points, you're reading about how, we actually don't have a great working hypothesis of what it is. Learning both sides of the discussion actually gives you a real strong mental representation of the entirety of the concept. So when you get asked about it on a test, you get it. You get more of a working knowledge of the subject than somebody who just tried to memorize the material for that specific test. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is that I don't know how much learning is actually going on in a program that's so concentrated. And because we are worried about the grade and we're worrying about passing, it's like once you pass it, like, oh, thank God. And then you're kind of on to the next thing, right? You don't take it with you as much as you should. And so I do think that doing that extra work, reading research articles that you're not required to do, is just extra practice. And we've talked on this show before about the notion of deliberate practice, and that's, any endeavor, any sporting endeavor, it makes sense. Like golf, obviously I'm going to go out there and practice, focus on, nuance of movements and different shots and different aspects of the game. But I don't see learning in this field as much different. There's different aspects of learning. I want to learn how to read research better. You got to read research. I want to learn, how to think about certain concepts in a more abstract way. Well, you've got to challenge yourself to do so, and podcasts and discussion boards and all these things help with that. So it really is just about prioritizing your time. I would say, like, if you ask your classmates, Nate, the ones that say they don't have time for it, and then you had them do a 24-hour diary activity log, you would probably be able to find some time slots where they could listen to a podcast or go on a discussion board or something like that. So actually, that's a question that just popped into my head. How do you schedule that time to do that extra work?
I mean, for me, it's fun to go watch a lecture.
You nerd.
I know, it's
you liar.
I mean, I don't do it all the time. I give myself a break, but when I drive to school, it's not that far. It's only 10 minutes to school. But if I drive around town or whatever, I pretty much put on a podcast. It might not necessarily be Clinical Athlete, but it's something, So that's one way I get more information. And a lot of times, after a test, after we have our anatomy exams, usually it's Tuesday, and then our practicals on Thursday. So on Thursday, I'm done, and I'll go home and I'll go watch a lecture. It might not get through an entire lecture, but I get some good tidbits from lectures and stuff. So that's kind of how I do it. On Sundays, I that's when I read my research when I can. I'm a part of a journal club for PT school where we're doing research on knees and ACLs, and I don't know, have you guys heard of Terry Grindstaff?
I've not.
Yeah.
Well, he does a lot of knee ACL research, and he's awesome. He's real tight with Dan Lorenz and Eric Myra and stuff like that. But I'm doing research with him, so I do read a lot of the papers he sends, and most times when I read papers, it's kind of blah, 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 whatever. But with his papers, I'm I gotta get every bit of information out of it, because he has some really good questions that week. So usually Sunday nights or Saturday nights, if I'm not hanging out with friends and stuff like that, I'll be at home reading research. So I'm done studying.
What a bumpin' Saturday night. I say that. That's it. I say that, but actually, it sounds pretty cool to me. I've heard some people say this, and I'm curious to know if you find this, Nate, that with social media being what it is, if you kind of surround yourself with some, trustworthy outlets in terms of research, who can kind of synthesize what the research is saying, or at the very least throw up these journal abstracts, or say hey, check out these articles, that can be a really useful thing in terms of pointing you in a given direction, so that you can stay up on this sort of stuff. Have you found that yourself at all?
Yeah, I mean, I follow a zillion accounts on Instagram. Twitter is a great outlet, actually. I'll retweet stuff, and then a lot of times I'm like, oh man, I like retweeted something, so I'll go back to my profile and like look for it, and like, and then I'll actually like read the full text like whenever I have time. But yeah, like I really enjoy like following Clinical Athlete, because you guys, I mean, each post with like the squat myth with knees going over your toes, there was like 5 references, and I was like, oh sweet, and I'll like go look through all of those and stuff like that. So I really do. I mean, I enjoy following accounts that have that list references and stuff, because at this point in my life, I don't really need more theories or conjectures. Granted, if someone's very, very smart, I value their opinion. Like, yeah, I'll take it. But with like, if I ever get in a discussion with my professors, if I have a presentation in a class, I would like some kind of research or something to back anything I say. So I think Instagram and Twitter are great educational tools.
Just gotta have your filter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tough one, but yeah, I think because there's a guy that I saw. Gosh, I don't remember his name, but he was a PhD guy, and he's all like, "Oh, there's correct movement. Movement is everything," and he had like stuff to back it, and it, I mean, it has me asking questions. I don't want to say like he's wrong before I actually look through his claims, but yeah, I mean, there are stuff that disagree with you, and sometimes it's good to look at it.
I think what you just said right there separates you from like 90% of all people who engage in internet debates, in not wanting to say that the other person's wrong before examining the arguments first.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you guys get a lot of that.
I've just made it yeah, sorry, you go, Quinn.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's just human nature. I mean, I struggle. I have biases like anybody else. So if I see something that kind of catches my eye that is going against my bias, automatically my mind is it's bullshit. It's so hard to take a step back and to be, okay, well, I will take the time to read and learn about your side, and then we can come back and discuss these things. I mean, that just doesn't, social media is great. I think, Nate, you hit it on the head. Social media is great for a reference, but I don't think it's super great for actually having discussions in which both parties are in it to learn. I think social media is a quick fire way. It's a quick fire pissing match, and it's who can type their comment the fastest before the other person gets their second comment in. And it's like, let me dump as many links to abstracts as I possibly can to just bombard this person. And then when the other person comes back with an immediate response, it becomes obviously clear that they didn't read those references, and so that's a point of contention. It's just a really shit show, really. But it's useful for me to hear that, it's still like posts are helpful. A little bit of tidbit of information, a little narrative, and then here are some references for you to go dig into on your own, formulate your own thought process, and then we can come back. that's why I love the forum so much, is because that is a platform where we can actually have discussion. It's a little bit more nuanced. And hearing you talk about what you like, the journal club, this is all really, really helpful, because I want to start doing that stuff in our forum too, having journal clubs and having we used to have student meetups in the past. We want to get those going again. So that would be super, super helpful. You mentioned a couple podcasts that you're into, PT and Quest, PT on Ice. Any other resources or books that you've read recently, or that other students could benefit from?
I mean, it depends on the topic, and I'm not much of a reader as far as when it comes to like reading for entertainment, because I just don't. It's weird. I don't read a whole lot, but if it's something I'm into, I'm like reading like all day. But a book that I just got is called Crooked, and I read like a couple pages into it, and it's really interesting, just talking about like the national back pain epidemic. I think that's a great resource. If you want to learn how to coach, I think Starting Strength's a great resource for as far as like mechanics and movement and stuff. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on it, but I think that's a good just kind of like methodological way of teaching how to do 5 exercises. And you know, I may not do it with everybody, but I think it's a great resource. Other podcasts, I think Adam Meekin's NAF Physio podcast. A lot of times when I listen to podcasts, I just type in the podcast app someone that I follow, and I'll like Greg Layman, and I'll like type it in, and then I'll listen to like the first thing that comes up. Or Jonathan Sullivan is a great guy. The group at Stanford is the Stanford Pain Academy group with Dr. Sean Mackey and Beth Darnell. They're great when it comes to like opioid epidemic. There's a guy in Michigan that I listen to, but that's mainly like on YouTube. And yeah, I think I would recommend students join like the Clinical Athlete Forum. There's loads of great stuff on there, and it comes with references. So I think it's great to do that. And I think it's also important for students to go find information on their own and have like their own like Pico questions to type in on PubMed and stuff. Just because sometimes if you're given like a narrative on a paper, it could kind of skew your thoughts and be like, oh yeah, it's cool, or like, oh, this paper sucks. Whereas I think it's beneficial for us to learn how to figure out like, why does this paper suck on our own, or like, why is this paper awesome, or what's sound or what's not good about a paper. So yeah, I think there's a balancing match of finding resources and going to seek out information on your own.
Well, you mentioned starting strength is just, like you said, learn 5 basic movements: squat, bench, dead, overhead press, and clean. I mean, if every physical therapy student had a working knowledge of those 5 movements, and you know, a couple of regressions in their back pocket for each movement, we'd be in an okay spot.